Look at what's happening now with respect to the economy of Russia, Europe, China, the United States. They're inextricably linked. Information is flowing continuously so that Putin can't hide what's happening in Russia. And increasingly, he can't even hide it inside of Russia. So the world has shrunk, and we're going to have obligations beyond our shores, and it will be in our self-interest to act on those values that we hold in common with people like a Zelensky. That's not always going to express itself in terms of us entering into a war.
It's evident that the climate crisis is deeply rooted into systems of colonialism. And like I've said, we can't have climate justice without racial justice. Many times you see that the communities or the people that are most impacted by the climate crisis are communities of Black people, communities of people of color, or indigenous communities. Like I've explained what's happening on the African continent and how we are least responsible for this crisis, but we are suffering some of the worst impacts of climate change.
In many respects, this is a war about history. Basically, Vladimir Putin has invaded Ukraine because Ukraine has not comported with his view of Russian history. And in many respects, that puts us all in a predicament because it's very difficult not just to fight history or fight for history, but also to negotiate history and find a settlement to this conflict on the basis of differing views of history.
This is the perfect place to talk about our deeply interconnected world and why specifically Americans from all parts of our country should care about the global food security crisis. After all, the Chicago Council was born in response to pervasive isolationism. A century later, with COVID, conflicts, and climate change, it might be tempting to bury our heads in the sand again, to buy into the false dichotomy that we ought to focus on our own problems and not on the problems of others. But the truth is, our greatest challenges are shared. Our world is deeply interconnected. The right policies abroad help us all here at home, and the food insecurity crisis offers an urgent example. Right now, the world is experiencing the worst food security crisis any of us have ever seen.
Because of slowing growth, and now because of both because of COVID and because of inflation, especially in the prices of foods and fuels and so on, poverty reduction has come to an end. So for the first time, we'll actually have a higher poverty rate now than last year, etc.
We would do well if we had leaders in both political parties that stood up and accepted the results of elections and went and fought in the years ahead on the issues until the next election comes around, instead of undermining confidence in elections, as has occurred since the election in 2020 and in the months that followed that tragic day, but was occurring in the 4 years before. I think we ought to bring all of that rhetoric to an end. We ought to channel concern about elections into legitimate legal processes and ultimately do everything we can to ensure the integrity of the vote for all the American people.
We've been very clear publicly in the last few days in what we've been saying, both from the White House and State Department as well as from our embassy. We believe the Chinese people have a right to protest peacefully. They have a right to make their views known. They have a right to be heard. That's a fundamental right around the world. It should be. And that right should not be hindered with, and it shouldn't be interfered with.
Well, women, of course, experience all periods of economic downturn more acutely, more particularly than men. Women's job losses have been higher than men's throughout this process. The COVID pandemic hit women very hard. They're, of course, as in so many places, up against not only that economic downturn, rising inflation, but doing the social care for their families during the pandemic. And of course, there's a long history of them experiencing life in the Islamic Republic as secondhand citizens. The killing of Mahsa Amini at the hands of morality police really brought home, I think, in a deeply humiliating way, the status of women in Iran today.